Welcome to another virtual author chat at the Poison Pen Bookstore. I'm John Charles, and today the Poison Pen and I are delighted to have back with us one of our favorite authors, Jennifer Deibel, whose new book is Heart of the Glen. Before we begin, today the Poison Pen does have copies of Jennifer's new book as well as her backlist available. If you'd like us to hold a copy or put one in the mail, just give us a call or go online to the Poison Pen Bookstore. Now I'd like to welcome Jennifer.
Thank you so much. It's so good to be back.
Thank you for joining us today. For those that aren't familiar with you, you had a life before you were a published author. What can you tell us about Jennifer before you got your first book published?
So, the majority of my grown-up life before I got published, I was living overseas. My husband and I lived in Ireland for a total of about 6 years, and then we lived in Vienna, Austria for about a year and a half. And it was not long after that, when we came back to the States that I jumped into the publishing world and have been blessed to do that ever since.
Did a job take you overseas, or what brought you over there?
The first 2 years we were there as students, just studying the language and culture, and then, our second time that we went back to Ireland, we were there for 4 years, and we were working for an American-based travel company, bringing tour groups over and trying to kinda get beyond Blarney and get to kinda the real Ireland. And then when we were in Vienna, we were working for a faith-based nonprofit organization. I was doing writing and editing for them, and my husband was doing web design and videography and photography for them.
What made you want to study Ireland? What was it about it that drew you in?
I have Irish roots. My maiden name is Martin. So my father's family, I have a cousin who's traced us back to the 16th century. But really, the catalyst was when we were dating, my husband spent a summer abroad in Wales and really just fell in love with the whole Celtic idea and the six Celtic cultures and countries. And through the person he worked with there is how we kind of got our opportunity to go over for our 2 years to study abroad. And then that just, we were hooked after that.
So you decided you wanted to become an author. What was your initial path to publication like?
Long and windy. I first started writing what would eventually become my debut novel, A Dance in Donegal, when we came back from that 2-year study abroad stint. I was expecting our first child, and I really just was looking for a way to process everything we had experienced. Those 2 years were even now, almost 20 years later, actually over 20 years later, those 2 years were probably the most difficult of our life, but also the most 2 of the most amazing years, and so I was just kind of trying to sort through my myriad of emotions, and then when our daughter was born, it kinda sat for several years, but that's really kind of what started me writing kind of for reals. I'd always kind of written in journals and stories for myself and things my whole life, but and then fast forward to when our son was born, there was a website for a parenting website that was starting up that I applied to write for. And when I was accepted to be a monthly contributor for that, that's kind of when I really started pursuing kind of publication, not full time, but as professionally as I could. And that was, well, our son was just born and he's 14. So that was probably 14, 15 years ago that I started that journey. And I just wanted a way to encourage other people and to kind of help broaden their worldview the way mine had been through our experiences. And so it's just a joy for me to be able to kind of share my experiences and help them vicariously fall in love with Ireland through what I was able to learn.
Shift gears and talk about your new book, Heart of the Glen. What do you want readers to know about the book?
It is a book full of encouragement and real, raw, real world struggles. Anyone who has walked any sort of faith journey will know that there's always doubts, there's always questions, and we go through seasons of like wondering if God is even there. And that's what my two main characters are really struggling with. Like, if he is there, why is this happening? And like, what's the purpose in all of this? And so if you've ever struggled with those things, you'll be able to relate to my characters. And so I really hope that people will leave after reading this book encouraged in their own faith journey, whatever that looks like, but also kind of learning a little bit more about some unknown sides of Ireland, like the Tweed industry and some long lost villages that have disappeared, 100 years ago, and just really enjoy the Irish culture while also being encouraged.
I'm going to let you pronounce your protagonist's name because I'm horrible with Irish names. So she definitely starts off the book in a very bad place.
Yes, poor Saoirse. She has just lost her family in a tragic accident, and in kind of a last act of kindness, her employer has set up a new place for her to go work. And she gets there, and her carriage leaves, and so she's literally in the middle of Donegal by herself, and no one is answering the door, and a neighbor tells her that the lord that she was supposed to be the head maid for passed away the week prior, and his title died with him, and his wife has now fled to Australia to be with her sister. So she starts the story literally in the middle of nowhere with nothing, nobody, and she really just doesn't know what to do. So she just starts walking, and eventually a kind soul comes by and rescues her from the dark of night, who is Eileen McCready, who happens to be the sister of our hero. And she allows Saoirse to stay in their barn for the night until she can talk to her brother about what they want to do, and kind of that's when the real shenanigans begin and things get a little crazy.
The book has definitely got a lot of different themes that you explore, including grief and loss. But another one that I found really interesting to watch unfold is how we need to be able to give help when we can and accept
Mhm.
help. People give it to us because Owen's very difficult about that.
Yes. Owen has had to kind of be the one to carry everybody his whole life. They lost him and Eileen lost their siblings various ways throughout their life, and then they had lost their parents at a very young age. I think, if I remember right, Owen was like maybe 13 when his parents passed away, and so from that time on, it was him and Eileen, and he really had to carry their farm and their livelihood on his shoulders. And so when he's forced to sort of let someone else come in and help take some of the load, it's really hard for him because he feels like either they're not going to do it right, or he should be able to handle this.
Mhm.
He, he he's the man of the house. He shouldn't need help, especially from a woman, especially struggle with, you know, letting someone help you, which is really can be a blessing to that kind of exercises her own personal demons is through service and helping others. And so that really it was kind of a fun and winding road to explore as well as I was writing the story.
The other thing, well, one of the other things I found fascinating was the information about the Tweed
Mm.
industry in Ireland. I had no idea that this was a major deal. How did you go about researching this? What made you think this is what I want to weave into the story, so to speak?
The whole idea for this story sparked when one night, I don't remember where the rest of my family was, but I had the house to myself, and I was just scrolling Instagram, and a snippet of an old documentary from a series in Ireland called I think it was called Hands, and it was like exploring all the different creative ways people earned their livelihood. And so it was just a snippet about these three brothers who lived alone and were cottage weavers, meaning they were contracted with McGee's of Donegal Tweed to weave tweed. And so they had a shed behind their house that had their loom in there. And so one of them was responsible for all the weaving, one of them tended to the garden, and one of them tended to the sheep. And so I searched it up and I found the whole episode on YouTube. And it really got me thinking, what would happen if suddenly he was no longer able to weave? Like what would they do? And so that's kind of what sparked the idea. And so then I got to really research the history of when did people start doing this whole cottage weaving thing. And it turns out it was not long after the famine, the government had created a scheme to try and help keep rural Irish people afloat. And so they would give them a grant to buy a loom, and then they could create their linen or their tweed and sell it, or they could contract with one of the tweed companies. And it was really interesting to learn about how they would dye the wool and what would they use to color it and when would they do this, and how everyone in the household had a role to play. And then I discovered Master Weaver Colum Sweeney, who lives in County Donegal, and he weaves. And he was gracious enough to spend about an hour with me on Zoom, just talking me through the terminology and what it would look like, and would it even be possible for someone to learn the trade, quickly and things like that. So it was really fascinating to learn, and it was fun to kind of work it all through the story as well.
Has the process changed that much today from what it was like back in the 1900s?
Yes and no. It's all mechanized now, but it's still overseen by local weavers. And the tweed or the yarn is now, I think, I could be wrong on this. I think there are more synthetic dyes being used. They're not going out and picking gorse flowers to dye their wool and things like that. But the tradition is very much the same. And I actually just recently learned that Harris Tweed in Scotland has a local protection through the government where it has to come from a certain area to be called Harris Tweed, kind of like
Like food items like
champagne.
Parmesan. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So the Irish weavers are trying to get the same protection because there are some big companies that are selling tweed under the name of Donegal tweed when it was made, not anywhere near there. So they are really trying to protect that legacy and legend almost, and the traditions and history of it all, which I hope they're able to get that done.
What surprised you the most about the weaving process as you were researching it?
I think just how all-encompassing it really is. So a double wide loom would have at least 1,000 single threads running the length of the loom that would have to be all individually tied, and they'd have to pass through these things hanging down in the middle called a heddle, and they have to be tied onto those. And so then when you push a certain pedal, it would lift certain ones, and so that's how you could set the pattern. So when you're weaving, you have to have your feet moving on the pedals, and then your one hand is pulling the levers to lift the right heddles at the right time, and then the other one is passing the shuttle through. And so you really can't talk. Plus, it's extremely loud. And so it really is an all-encompassing one-man job, which kind of surprised me. I sort of imagine this like quaint, quiet by the fire and chit chat and things. So it was
Yeah.
fun to play around with how could the hero and heroine connect in a
Mhm.
situation like that where they can't be talking. And so it was fun to work in some romantic tension as he was trying to teach her how to do this and he couldn't use his hands and stuff like that. So, but that was really surprising to me to learn that it was just really like mind, body, and soul had to be truly focused the whole time you're working.
Another thing that I'm not sure why I was surprised, but I was, is that tweed has a pattern, that there's actually an art to designing it. How does that work?
I don't pretend to know exactly how it works, but I know, some of the most popular patterns are like herringbone, or there's, I believe, I mean, and then there's plaid, traditional plaid. But the one that my hero was famous for is called the barley corn, which just to at first glance appears to not have a pattern at all, but it really does have a pattern, and it's designed to sort of mimic the landscape of Donegal. And so it's, if you were to kind of look at it and squint your eyes, you could almost see the heather covered fields and the slate hills and things like that, because it's meant to match where it came from. And so that was fascinating to me. But I still don't fully understand how they choose which heddles go when and all of that to decide um, or to create that pattern. It truly is an art that you have to master.
Is it still a big industry in Ireland, tweed?
It really is. I don't know that cottage weaving is as much a part of, like, the official Donegal tweed, but they still source they hire local weavers to work in their warehouses, and they source their wool, from both local and, I think some Italian for different blends of wool and things like that. But Donegal tweed and Harris tweed are kind of the top 2 brands in the world, the 2 best known, and those are the 2 brands that are mostly worn by, royalty and things like that. So it really is a massive part of their economy as well as their kind of lore of artistry and creativity as well.
Have you thought about doing any side deals with your new book and the tweed companies in Ireland?
Oh my goodness. I would love to. I call him Sweeney, the man that I got to interview. He does like 3 and 6 month resident courses in weaving. I would love to go do that, but I actually did sort of partner with Mickey Tweed, which is Donegal Tweed, to get little coasters as part of my pre-order goodies that we were promoting. So the first, I don't remember how many, 150 or so people that pre-ordered the book through my publisher got a square of Donegal of authentic Donegal tweed with a little label and things like that. So that was super fun.
Let's talk a little bit about how you approach your books as a writer, because the process is as different as the writers themselves. When
Hmm.
you sit down to begin a project, what does it look like and how do you work through that particular book?
Oddly enough, I have some things that are the same every time, but the
Mm.
process itself really varies with each book based on the book itself, my life at the time. We've got 3 kids. Our oldest just turned 20, our middle is turning 18, and she'll be starting college in the fall, and then our youngest is 14. So I feel like my home landscape is ever changing as well. But every single book has started with a question of kind of what if. This one was what if a tweed weaver could no longer weave, but he had to. So I always start, and it's usually sparked by some random thing that I see or hear out in the wild somewhere, and then I fall down the rabbit hole of research to see, okay, is this a viable idea? And so I usually write up a short synopsis with the major plot points, the conflict and the resolution to pitch to my publisher. And then once I have that approval, then I start writing. I'm a total planter. I don't plot it out fully, but I plan it in my head a lot. I'll kind of write a scene in my head while I'm going about my day or doing different things. And then when I sit down to write, I let it play out like a movie and I kind of just transcribe what I see. So that's a really enjoyable process unless my brain just isn't cooperating with me. So sometimes I have to force it into movie mode, but that's kind of my process. And then I'm a teacher by day, so most of my books get written over summer break, winter break, and then like an hour and a half at a time during soccer practice or something like that. I have to kind of use those fringe hours to make sure I'm getting everything done.
Part of the Glen is your fifth book, is that correct?
It
Yes.
is, it is. It's
Has it
unbelievable.
gotten easier, or does each book present its own challenges?
I would say each book presents its own challenges. Oddly enough, the book that came easiest to me was my second one, The Lady of Galway Manor, which I wrote in the middle of the pandemic. That story just flowed. The rest of them, um, for various reasons, I've hit challenges along the way, whether it's the messy middle where I'm not actually sure what's happening, or with this book, it felt almost like personal. Spiritually, I was struggling with kind of getting the message that I wanted out. And so I was kind of having to fight a lot of my own demons, if you will, in my real life to get the words on the page. But it's no less enjoyable than it was with my first book. I still pinch myself that I get to tell these stories, and share them with the world. It's truly a blessing.
I think what's interesting to people who may not be familiar with inspirational fiction or faith-based fiction is they tend to think it all comes in one box, but it's as
Mhm.
different as the writers themselves.
100%. And even my own books, Heart of the Glen, the faith element is extremely strong and very prevalent. In other books, it's more an undercurrent, like in The Lady of Galway Manor. It's more of just a subtle kind of river underneath everything else. And I think that's how it is with faith in our own lives. For some people, their faith is they're very vocal and they're very outgoing with it, and for other people it's more private and personal, and so the faith element in the story has to match the character who's living out that story. So that's another fun thing, but also a challenge to kind of work in. But the world of inspirational fiction is just absolutely phenomenal. There's some incredible storytellers out there, so I would hope that those who maybe don't really consider themselves religious, would be willing to give it a try, because there are some incredible, incredible authors out there.
Talk a little bit about your books as a whole because they're all set in Ireland.
Mm,
You want to, for lack of a better word, create a certain brand. So, how involved are you with the publisher when it comes to things like selecting titles, the cover art, making it look like this is a Jennifer Deibel book?
mm. I have been so blessed with Ravel. I get to be extremely involved in all of that. With every book, I fill out a little questionnaire where I can give them photos of, like, this is how I envision the characters. These are book covers that I like this element and this element. This is kind of what I'm envisioning. And the majority of my books, they have either kept my original working title or tweaked it a little bit. And I think the only one that the two that they did completely differently was Heart of the Glen and The Irish Matchmaker, and I was so grateful that they came up with that, because I was struggling to find one that really I thought did the story justice. And then same with the cover, I can give ideas of how I envision it. With Heart of the Glen, I had absolutely no notes. They knocked it out of the park. It was like they crawled in my head and put on the page even better than I envisioned. And other times I've been able to ask, "Hey, could you make her hair like 2 shades darker?" Or, "Could we try this or this?" And so I really do get to have a lot of input, um, which is really nice, because I don't know that that's every author's experience with, other publishers, but Revell has been, so gracious to allow me to speak into almost every aspect of the process.
Well, part of it also is to your credit too, because I think I'm remembering this correctly, but correct me if I'm not. You also include things like glossaries of Irish terms in your books, and you have notes that kind of direct the reader where they can find more information.
Yes, and those I have kind of carte blanche on. My editor is amazing, because she will compare when I'm drafting, she will compare the glossary from this book to the glossary in all the other books, and if there's, the same phrase, she makes sure I spell it exactly the same way every time and things like that. But they let me have that glossary, which for this book, we've moved to the front of the book, because a lot of readers said they didn't even know it was there until they had finished it. But I do try, for the Irish language that I do include, I try to make it pretty clear from context. But if people want to know how do you pronounce it and things like that, we put that in there. And then with my author's note, I always try to include, what things in the story are actually happened, and then I point them to where they can learn more about that. So it's really fun to be able to kind of add just a little extra. And as a teacher, I love that, because I love being able to help people learn.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it's really fun to be able to include those little tidbits to help people kind of just deepen their experience with the book.
Their appreciation. Yeah, definitely. This might be new to Heart of the Glen, but you may have done it for other books. I'm just not aware. But one thing I thought was really clever on your part was you created a book discussion, readers discussion element on your website.
Yes, that was really fun too. We did that as well with A Dance in Donegal, with my debut novel. And then I have one that's a little bit different format. It's kind of more discussion questions and like a virtual tour for one of the other books. I forget now which one it was. I think it was the Maid of Ballymaccool, but with The Heart of the Glen, I wanted something different. With A Dance in Donegal, we had a playlist of songs about Donegal or kind of inspired by Ireland. We had a bunch of recipes, we had some discussion questions, and with Heart of the Glen, I really wanted to kind of do something a little bit different. So, of course, we have the discussion questions, but we also have a quiz in there of which character are you, which was really fun to create, as well as I believe there's another playlist, and a recipe. Owen eats stew throughout the whole thing. It's his favorite dish, and so that is an actual recipe from my childhood that was fun to kind of work in as well. So that's super fun, and it is available on my website, free for anyone who would like to take a look at that or use it with their book club or just for themselves.
Do you engage with book clubs? Are you open to?
Yeah, 100%. If they are local to Arizona, especially the greater Phoenix area, I am always willing to come either online or in person. Um, Obviously, weekends are typically best for me as a teacher or summertime, but I have met with other book clubs throughout the country and around the world virtually, which I love. Connecting with other readers and bibliophiles is my favorite thing. So I'm definitely open to that. So if you have a book club, reach out to me, and I'd be happy to come chat with you guys.
Let's talk a little bit about Jennifer as a reader because you're not just a writer, you're also a reader. Um, I'm guessing you don't read exclusively Irish literature. Who are some of your um, important authors, books that have made an impact on you as a reader?
Mm. I typically read almost exclusively inspirational fiction because I found for me, um, just that helps my mindset stay where I want my mindset to be. Liz Curtis Higgs was hugely influential in my own writing experience. She has been so gracious, and her stories are just phenomenal. And she is the queen of research. But lately, I've been dabbling in a lot of contemporary romance and romantic suspense. Liz Johnson writes the most delicious romantic tension I've ever read. So I just devoured her latest three-book series, and she has another book. She just had a Christmas novella came out
Mhm.
this past year that was just so swoony. And then I've really been enjoying Natalie Walters and Jamie Jo Wright as well. They're just masters of their craft, incredible storytellers, and it's fun to read something different than I write, and kind of get to experience all different things um, around the world.
You can say as much about this next question or as little as you like, because I know authors are very sometimes protective of their work, but can you tell us anything about what's coming next?
The next official thing that's coming is something I'm really excited about. I have been working with Ravel on a devotional that is coming out in 2026. It's 31 days inspired by Irish blessings. So
Oh,
each day will have an Irish blessing, some scripture verses to read that relate to that theme, like a devotional or inspirational thought, and then kind of an action encouragement to try for that day. I don't know of anything else that is like it that exists. So it's been super fun to work on and kind of exercise my writing muscles in a little bit different way. So that's coming in spring 2026. I've also started drafting my next idea for a novel. We're in discussions with Ravel right now on contracts and things like that. But I have an idea for a story that I can't let go. So I'm working on that. That one I'm going to keep a little hush hush, but it's another Irish dramatic, fun, wild ride. So hopefully that'll come to fruition down the road.
and how can readers learn more about your books? Do you have a website? Are you on social media?
Yes, to both. My website is kind of the one-stop shop. It's got all the information about all of my books, links to my social media, as well as sign up for my monthly newsletter. And it's just jenniferdeibel.com. And then on social media, I have Instagram, Facebook. I have X, but I'm not really active there. Instagram is where I'm most active. So I hope readers will come connect with me there because, like I said, I love connecting with other readers and writers and people who love books. And if you like books with a dash of silliness, then we're gonna get along just fine.
Well, our time has never flown by more quickly. I'm just surprised at
I
how
agree.
fast it's gone. We've been very fortunate to have with us today virtually Jennifer Deibel, whose new book is Heart of the Glen. It will be available in bookstores and libraries near you, like the Poison Pen. I'd like to thank Jennifer for taking time to visit with us again. And for those tuning in to another virtual chat, thank you for joining us at the Poison Pen.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.